I stood in the back of Grace Fellowship Church on Sunday, March 17, 2004, watching my wife sing in the choir 23 weeks pregnant with another man's child, while her father preached about honesty from the pulpit. And in exactly 4 minutes, I was going to end everything they'd built. If you got some time and maybe something to drink, settle in. Because this story isn't quick and it sure as hell isn't pretty, but it's true. Every word of it. So why did I wait 6 months to expose her? Why did I let her post ultrasound photos on Instagram with captions like, "Our miracle baby blessed"? Why did I smile through Christmas dinner while her father cried tears of joy over a grandchild that wasn't even mine? Because I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to believe their lies had worked. And then I needed to take it all away in front of everyone they'd ever lied to. This is the story of how I went from the quiet nurse who married the pastor's daughter to the man who brought down an entire church's leadership in one Sunday morning. It's about betrayal, calculated revenge, and finally, learning that you don't have to keep performing for people who never really saw you in the first place. Here's how it happened. I met Emily Thompson in September 2019 at a Grace Fellowship Young Adults event. I was 25, new to the church, and honestly just looking for community after a rough couple of years. My parents had gone through a brutal divorce. I'd moved to Georgia for a fresh start, and someone at the hospital where I worked as a pediatric nurse told me Grace Fellowship had a great singles group. Emily was 24, absolutely beautiful, and the kind of confident that comes from growing up as the pastor's daughter in a megachurch. Her father, David Thompson, had been senior pastor at Grace Fellowship for over 20 years, 2,000 members, big budget, the kind of church that ran multiple services and had its own coffee shop in the lobby. Our first date was volunteering at the church's homeless ministry. That should have told me something right there. Emily picked the activity. She picked everything, actually, but I didn't see it then. I just saw this gorgeous, faithful woman who seemed to actually care about people. And after watching my parents tear each other apart, the idea of a stable, faith-centered relationship felt like coming home. We got married in June 2020. 400 guests. Pastor David officiated, naturally. Emily wore her grandmother's dress. I wore a rented tux that cost more than my monthly car payment. My family, my mom, my older brother Michael, a handful of cousins, they sat on one side of this massive sanctuary. Emily's side was packed. Extended family, church elders, community leaders, people I'd never met who all seemed to know exactly who Emily was and had very specific ideas about who I should be. My mom whispered to me before the ceremony, "You sure about this?" I thought she was just being protective. Now I know she saw something I didn't. Emily's mother, Patricia, had this way of giving compliments that felt like auditions. "We're so glad Emily found someone. Solid," she told me at the rehearsal dinner. Solid, like I was a piece of furniture. "Christopher works so hard at the hospital," she'd tell her friends. "Such a servant's heart. Never, 'He's brilliant' or 'He makes our daughter happy.' Just solid, reliable, safe." The honeymoon was at a Christian couples retreat in the mountains. I'd wanted to go to the beach, maybe somewhere we could just be alone and figure out being married. But Emily had already booked it. "It'll be so good for our spiritual foundation," she said. So we spent our honeymoon in workshops about biblical submission and financial planning and how to have a God-honoring sex life, which is exactly as awkward as it sounds. But I loved her. Or I loved the idea of her. Or maybe I just loved the idea of being enough for someone after growing up watching my dad leave because my mom wasn't enough for him. Either way, I committed. I showed up. I became the husband Emily needed me to be. We bought a house in the right neighborhood, meaning the one where 3 other church families lived. I took on extra shifts at the hospital, working nights to make the mortgage. Emily worked part-time at the church bookstore, which paid basically nothing, but it kept her connected to ministry. That's what Pastor David called it. Ministry. Like selling coffee mugs with Bible verses was somehow more holy than my job keeping children alive in the ICU. I volunteered everywhere, Sunday morning setup crew, hauling tables and chairs at 6 a.m. Sound booth occasionally when they needed someone. Wednesday night parking lot attendant in the summer heat. I learned pretty quickly that being Pastor David's son-in-law meant you were supposed to be more visible, more involved, more everything than everyone else. Setting an example, Patricia would say. Our small group Bible study met every other Tuesday. Brandon and Melissa Miller were part of it. Brandon was the church's worship leader, 32, talented, one of those guys who could play 6 instruments and had a voice that made middle-aged women cry during the Sunday morning set. Melissa was sweet, quieter than him, busy with their 2 kids. They'd been married 8 years. There were 3 other couples in the group. We'd meet at someone's house, eat snacks, discuss whatever book Pastor David was preaching through. Brandon usually led the discussions. He had this way of making everything sound profound, even when he was just rephrasing what we'd all heard on Sunday. I noticed Emily and Brandon had good chemistry, but I didn't think anything of it. They were both musical, both involved in worship. Sometimes Emily would stay late after Sunday service to practice harmonies with the worship team. "Brandon's such a perfectionist about the arrangements," she'd laugh, "but it makes us sound amazing." She was right. They did sound amazing, standing there in the choir, their voices blending perfectly, Brandon on guitar and Emily on the microphone for the bridge of some worship song about God's faithfulness. The irony of that is almost funny now. Almost. The first real crack showed up in late 2022. I'd switched to mostly night shifts at the hospital, 3 or 4 nights a week, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. The pay differential was significant, and we needed it. Emily and I had been getting pressure from her parents about starting a family. "You're not getting any younger," Patricia had said to Emily at Thanksgiving. And David wants grandchildren while he's still young enough to enjoy them. So, I worked nights to save money for the baby we were supposedly going to try for. Emily complained that I was never around, but when I tried to talk about our finances, she'd shut down. "God will provide," she'd say. Which is evangelical for, "I don't want to talk about money." She started getting more involved at church, choir rehearsals on Thursday nights, leadership meetings on Tuesday nights, women's Bible study on Wednesday mornings. She was always busy, always needed. One night in early 2023, my shift got canceled. A patient discharge opened up space, and they sent us home early. I got back to the house around 10 p.m. Emily's car wasn't in the driveway. I texted her, "Where are you?" 20 minutes later. Prayer meeting ran late, heading home now. She got in around 11:15, hair slightly messy, makeup smudged. "Wow, that ran long," I said. "Yeah, you know how Pastor Jeremy gets when he's praying over people." Pastor Jeremy was the associate pastor who ran weeknight services. We must have prayed for an hour. She kissed my forehead, went to take a shower. I sat on the couch wondering why my gut was screaming at me. The next week I noticed her phone had a passcode. We'd never had passcodes before. "Why'd you add that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, someone at the bookstore had their phone stolen last month, just being safe." Made sense. I told myself it made sense. But then the intimacy just stopped. Emily was always tired, always stressed about something at church, always just not in the mood. We'd gone from a couple times a week to maybe once a month by spring 2023, and even then it felt obligatory, like she was checking a box. Our 3rd anniversary was in June. She gave me a Bible with a note tucked inside. May our marriage always reflect God's plan. Not, "I love you," not, "Thank you for these 3 years." Just that cold, impersonal line that sounded like something she'd copy from a greeting card. I should have said something, should have fought for us. But I'd been trained my whole life not to make waves. My parents' marriage fell apart because they fought constantly. So I convinced myself that silence was peace. That if I just worked harder, loved better, became more of what Emily needed. We'd be fine. I'd been playing a part for so long. The devoted husband, the good son-in-law, the guy who never complained. I forgot I could question the script. By summer 2023, Emily's behavior got harder to ignore. She started taking phone calls in other rooms. She'd angle her screen away from me when texting. She bought new perfume, started working out more, paid more attention to her appearance. All the classic signs, right? But I kept making excuses. Then came the Tuesday night in August that changed everything. My shift got canceled again. I came home at 10 p.m. to an empty house. Checked the calendar, nothing marked. Texted Emily, "You okay? Where are you?" No response for 10 minutes. Then, at church, working on Christmas worship planning with Brandon. It was August. They were planning Christmas in August. I opened the Find My Friends app, something we'd set up years ago when Emily was worried about me driving home exhausted from night shifts. Her phone showed she was at Grace Fellowship. So was Brandon's. I knew because he'd shared his location with the whole worship team for scheduling purposes. I sat there for 20 minutes, trying to talk myself out of what I was about to do, but my hands were already grabbing my keys. The church parking lot was mostly empty at 10:30 p.m. Emily's white Honda CR-V was parked near the side entrance, Brandon's black Ford F-150 next to it. Lights were on in the church office wing. I sat in my car in the shadows and waited. Felt disgusting doing it. Felt like I was betraying my wife by not trusting her. But something in my gut wouldn't let me leave. 11 p.m. came and went. Finally, at 11:20, the office lights went out. The side door opened. Emily came out first, adjusting her purse strap. Brandon followed, laughing at something she'd said. They stood by their cars, talking for another 5 minutes. I was too far away to hear what they said, but their body language was comfortable, familiar. Brandon touched her arm when he laughed. Then they got in their separate cars and left. I drove home a different route, got there before Emily. When she walked in at 11:45, I was on the couch watching TV like I'd been there all evening. "Hey, babe," she said, dropping her purse. "Didn't know you'd be home. Shift got canceled. How was Christmas planning?" "Oh my gosh, exhausting." Brandon is such a perfectionist about the arrangements. We went through like 15 different versions of "Oh Holy Night." That's a lot of planning for August. "Yeah, well, you know how the church year works. We have to be ahead of schedule." She kissed my forehead, that same patronizing kiss, and went to shower. I sat there thinking about her purse strap, the way she'd adjusted it, thinking about how she'd checked her phone 3 times since walking in the door. That night I couldn't sleep. I'd been ignoring red flags for months, maybe longer. The distance, the secrecy, the way she looked happiest on Wednesday mornings, the day after Tuesday night meetings. If you've ever ignored a gut feeling because addressing it would break your whole world open, you know exactly how that feels. Like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing one more step changes everything, but you're too scared to look down. I started paying attention, really paying attention. Tuesdays, Emily was always gone until 10:30 or 11. Every single Tuesday. I created a shared Google Calendar, suggested we use it for better communication. Emily barely updated it. When she did, Tuesday nights just said church at leadership. I noticed Brandon seemed energized on Wednesdays during worship, like he'd had a really good Tuesday night. I found a receipt in Emily's car for a restaurant 40 miles away, a place we'd never been together. The date, a Saturday in September, when she'd told me she was shopping with friends. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every time I thought about confronting her, I'd hear Patricia's voice. Accusation is the tool of the enemy. I'd hear Pastor David preaching about trust and faith. I'd remember Emily's face on our wedding day, how sure I'd been that this was right. But the evidence kept piling up. In mid-September, our small group met at Brandon and Melissa's house. About halfway through the discussion, Melissa started crying. just broke down in the middle of Brandon's commentary on Ephesians. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. I need to ask you all to pray for us, for our marriage. Brandon's been so distant lately, working late, always on his phone. I feel like I don't even know him anymore." The room went silent. Brandon looked shocked, defensive. "Mel, this isn't the place." "When is the place, Brandon? You won't talk to me at home." Emily immediately got up and put her arm around Melissa. "Hey, it's okay. We're all here for you guys. Marriage is hard." I watched Brandon's face, watched Emily's. They didn't look at each other, but there was something in the air, an awareness. After the meeting, in the car, I said to Emily, "Do you think Brandon's having an affair?" She laughed. Actually laughed. "Brandon? No way. He's so devoted to the Lord. Melissa's probably just stressed with the kids. You're being paranoid." That word, paranoid. Like I was the problem for noticing that everyone around us seemed to be living double lives. We got home, and Emily was unusually affectionate that night. Initiated sex for the first time in weeks. It felt performative, like she was trying to prove something, but I was so desperate to believe things were okay that I let myself be convinced. I should have seen it then, but I didn't, because I'd been trained my whole life to ignore my own instincts, to trust authority figures, to never make accusations without absolute proof. So I decided to get proof. Early October, Emily left her phone charging in the bathroom while she showered. I heard the shower running. The phone sat there on the counter, screen dark. My hands were shaking. I picked it up. Face ID didn't work. She'd changed it to passcode only. But as I held it, a text preview lit up the screen. "Brandon, can't wait for tomorrow. I miss you." Tomorrow was Tuesday. I put the phone down before I did something I couldn't take back. Walked to the kitchen, gripped the edge of the counter, and threw up in the sink. That's when I installed the tracking app. There are apps designed for couples, marketed as relationship tools. Location sharing, calendar syncing, that kind of thing. Most of them have a feature where you can see your partner's location history. I installed one of those while Emily was still in the shower, disguised it as a "let's stay better connected" thing. She downloaded it that night without question. "This is sweet," she said. "I like that we can see where each other are." Yeah, sweet. For 2 weeks, I watched the data pile up. Every Tuesday night, Emily's phone was at Grace Fellowship from 7 p.m. to 10:30 or 11 p.m. every single time. 2 Saturdays, Emily told me she was shopping with friends. Her phone showed she was at a hotel 40 miles outside the city for 3 to 4 hours in the middle of the afternoon. I checked Brandon's Instagram on those Saturdays. Both times he'd posted stories about running errands or getting some work done. His location tags, the same general area as that hotel. I became a ghost in my own life. At work, I was on autopilot. At church, I smiled and shook hands and sang the worship songs. At home, I watched Emily move through our house like she belonged to someone else, and I was just the guy who paid the mortgage. I started having panic attacks in the hospital break room. One of my colleagues, an older nurse named Sharon, found me hyperventilating between shifts. "You need to see someone," she said. "This isn't normal stress." But I couldn't see the church counselor, couldn't tell anyone at Grace Fellowship. Because what if I was wrong? What if this was all paranoia and I destroyed my marriage and Emily's reputation over a misunderstanding? That's what they count on, you know, that you'll be too scared of looking crazy to trust what you know is true. Early November, I made a decision. I contacted a private investigator. His name was Frank Russo, former police detective, ran a small firm that specialized in infidelity cases. We met at a coffee shop an hour outside the city, far from anyone who might recognize me. I gave him everything, the patterns, the timeline, the locations. He listened without judgment, took notes in a small leather notebook. "You sure you want to know?" he asked when I was finished. "Because once you know for certain, you can't unknow it." "I already know. I said. "I just need proof that I'm not insane." He nodded. "I'll start Tuesday. Give me 3 weeks." I paid him half up front from my emergency fund, the money I'd been saving for the baby Emily wanted. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 weeks felt like 3 years. I went to work. I came home. I sat next to Emily at church while she sang about faithfulness, and Brandon led worship about God's grace. I smiled at Pastor David when he asked how we were doing. "Great," I'd say. "Really blessed." I'd been playing a part for so long, I forgot that I could just stop performing. Frank called me the week before Thanksgiving. "I have what you need. It's not good." We met at the same coffee shop. He slid a manila envelope across the table. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside, printed photographs, time-stamped and dated. Emily and Brandon entering a hotel room together. 3 separate occasions. Different hotels, different dates, always on Saturdays. A video file on a USB drive. I watched it later on my laptop in my car. Brandon and Emily in the church parking lot after what must have been a Tuesday night meeting, standing between their cars, talking, laughing. Then Brandon leaned in and kissed her. Long, familiar. Not a first kiss. A kiss that knew exactly what it was doing. Text message screenshots that Frank had pulled from cell tower data through contacts he had. I didn't ask how. Emily to Brandon. "He'll never suspect. He trusts me completely." Brandon to Emily. "When are you going to leave him? I'm tired of sneaking around." Emily to Brandon. "Not yet. I can't hurt my dad like that. We just have to be patient." I sat in that coffee shop parking lot for 2 hours staring at those photos. In one of them, Emily was wearing the cross necklace I'd given her for our first anniversary. She was wearing it while walking into a hotel room with another man. I checked into a motel that night. Called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Bought a bottle of whiskey from the gas station next door and sat on that terrible motel bed, drinking and crying and hating myself for not seeing it sooner. The evidence was dated from October. I'd been sitting on suspicions for months, but this made it real, undeniable. The person I'd married, the woman I'd rearranged my entire life for, had been lying to my face while sleeping with someone else. Not just someone, our worship leader, a married man with 2 kids, and she'd used church as their cover. Every Tuesday night, they were in that office. I pulled up the church calendar later and checked. Pastor David was always leading the main leadership meeting on Tuesdays. Emily wasn't supposed to be there. Neither was Brandon. They'd just started showing up, and everyone assumed they were being extra committed to ministry. I thought about Melissa's tearful prayer request, about her asking us to pray for her marriage while Emily comforted her, knowing exactly why Brandon was distant. The level of deception was staggering. I wanted to confront them. I wanted to scream. I wanted to send these photos to everyone and burn their lives down immediately. But I didn't, because I knew how this worked. I'd grown up in church. I knew if I exposed them now without a plan, they'd control the narrative. Emily would cry. Pastor David would rally around his daughter. Brandon would claim I was a jealous husband making accusations. Melissa might even defend him. So I sat in that motel room and made a choice. I was going to let them think they'd won. Let them think I was still the clueless, devoted husband. And then, when they were comfortable and complacent, I was going to take everything they'd built and burn it to the ground. But first, I had to make it through the holidays. Christmas morning, 2023. Emily's parents' house. The whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. 40 people crammed into Pastor David's large suburban home. The Christmas tree was enormous, covered in ornaments that spelled out Bible verses. Patricia had made her famous breakfast casserole. Everyone was laughing and opening presents and talking about how blessed we all were. I was sitting on the couch, watching Emily open a gift from her sister Angela when she grabbed my hand. "Can we talk?" she whispered. Privately. My heart was pounding. Did she know I knew? Was she about to confess? We went into Pastor David's study. Emily closed the door, and when she turned around, her eyes were shining. "I'm pregnant," she said. "We're going to be parents." The room tilted. I heard her talking. Something about how she'd taken 3 tests. They were all positive. She was about 6 weeks along. She hadn't wanted to say anything until she was sure. But all I could hear was the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. We hadn't had sex in over 4 months. I knew exactly whose baby it was. And she was standing there, radiant, expecting me to be happy. "Aren't you excited?" she asked, searching my face. I made myself smile, made myself pull her into a hug, made myself say all the right words. "I can't believe it," I said, which was true. "This is amazing." She pulled back, wiping happy tears. "I know it's earlier than we planned, but I just feel like this is God's timing, you know? Like this is His miracle for us. A miracle. She was calling another man's baby a miracle from God." We went back into the living room, and Emily announced it to everyone. Pastor David literally cried, stood up, pulled Emily into a hug, tears running down his face. "A grandchild," he kept saying. "Our first grandchild." Patricia hugged me, said, "You're going to be such a good father, Christopher." Angela squealed and started talking about baby showers. Emily's aunts started arguing about names. Someone pulled out their phone to start a family group chat. And I stood there, smiling, accepting congratulations, shaking hands with uncles who barely knew me, but were thrilled that I'd gotten the pastor's daughter pregnant. I excused myself to the bathroom and threw up for the 2nd time in a month. The next few weeks were torture. Emily immediately told everyone, our small group, her friends, social media, posted ultrasound photos with captions like, "Our little miracle, baby Hayes coming summer 2024. Blessed miracle from God." Brandon commented on every single post. "So happy for you guys," with praying hands emojis. I wanted to reply, "Thanks, man. Can't wait for you to meet your son." But I didn't, because I was playing the long game now. Here's the thing about church culture that people outside of it don't understand. Image is everything. If I exposed Emily and Brandon right then, in the immediate aftermath of her pregnancy announcement, I'd look like the villain, the cruel husband who couldn't handle impending fatherhood. The paranoid man making wild accusations about the pastor's perfect daughter. I needed proof that would be undeniable. Proof that would make it impossible for them to spin the story. So I started researching prenatal paternity testing. Turns out you can do a paternity test as early as 8 or 9 weeks into pregnancy through a simple blood draw, non-invasive, safe for the baby. The mother's blood contains fragments of the baby's DNA. All I needed was Emily to agree to genetic screening, and I knew exactly how to get her to do it. At her next OB appointment in mid-January, I went with her, played the concerned first-time father. When the doctor mentioned optional prenatal screening for chromosomal abnormalities, I jumped on it. "We should do that," I said to Emily, "just to be safe. You know, because of family history and everything." Emily looked uncertain. "Is it expensive?" "Insurance usually covers most of it," the doctor said. "And it's just a blood draw." I squeezed Emily's hand. "I think we should, for the baby's health." She agreed. Of course she did, because refusing would have looked suspicious. What Emily didn't know was that the same blood draw could be used for paternity testing. I'd researched labs that would do it discreetly. Paid cash, used a different clinic, forged Emily's signature on the consent form. Ethically questionable? Absolutely. But I was past caring about ethics. I also needed Brandon's DNA for comparison. That was easier than I expected. After a Sunday service in late January, I grabbed the paper coffee cup Brandon had been drinking from, waited until he walked away, and pocketed it. Felt like a criminal. Drove to the lab that afternoon and dropped it off. 2 weeks later, the results came back. I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot when I opened the email. Clinical language, genetic markers, percentages. Bottom line, 0% probability that I was the father. 99.7% probability that Brandon Miller was the biological father. I stared at that document for 20 minutes, read it over and over, let the reality of it settle into my bones. Emily had been carrying Brandon's child, had been lying to me, to her family, to everyone, had been letting me prepare to raise another man's baby, had been letting her father preach about family values while she played the glowing, expectant mother with her affair partner's child growing inside her. And in that moment, something in me shifted. The grief, the betrayal, the humiliation. It all crystallized into something cold and clear. Not hate exactly, more like resolve. They were going to face consequences, real consequences. Not in some private meeting with church elders where they could cry and ask for forgiveness and move on with a slap on the wrist. Public consequences, in front of everyone they'd lied to. I'd been the good guy my whole life, the one who kept quiet, who avoided conflict, who let people walk all over him because making waves was worse than being miserable. But I was done playing that part. Over the next month, I became meticulous. I collected everything, printed out the paternity test results, multiple copies notarized, organized all of Frank's PI photos and videos into a timeline, downloaded all of Emily's social media posts about the pregnancy, her proclamations about God's blessing, her smiling selfies with her hand on her belly. Retrieved our old phone records showing hundreds of texts between Emily and Brandon. Recorded a conversation, legally with one-party consent in Georgia, where I asked Emily directly if she'd been faithful to me. She looked me in the eyes and said, "Of course. Christopher, where's this coming from?" I created a PowerPoint presentation, title slide, "The Truth About the Miracle." It felt dramatic, but I needed something visual, something undeniable. I consulted with a divorce attorney outside our city. Her name was Rebecca Chen. Sharp, mid-40s, no nonsense. I showed her everything. "This is airtight," she said. "You'll get everything you're entitled to in the divorce. Probably won't owe child support since you're not the biological father. When do you want to file?" "Not yet," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because I want them to face what they did publicly first. Filing now means it stays quiet. I want everyone to know the truth." She leaned back in her chair. "I get it. But are you sure? Public humiliation can backfire, make you look vindictive." "They humiliated me for over a year," I said. "They had sex in a church office while I was working night shifts to save for the baby they said we'd have together. They let everyone celebrate a pregnancy they knew was built on lies. I'm done protecting their reputations." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Okay, but you need to be prepared for the fallout. This won't just affect them. It'll affect you too. I knew that. I'd thought about nothing else for weeks. I opened a separate bank account and moved half our shared savings, my legal right in Georgia. Changed my direct deposit to the new account. Started looking at apartments, though I didn't sign a lease yet. Gathered all our important documents. Marriage certificate, tax returns, car titles. I told my parents everything. My mom cried. My dad, who I barely spoke to anymore, called me for the first time in a year and said, "You do what you need to do, son. Don't let them make you feel guilty for it." My brother Michael flew in from Oregon. "I'm here for whatever you need," he said. "You want me to punch someone? I'll punch someone." I laughed for the first time in months. "Not yet, but stick around." I found a therapist who specialized in religious trauma. Her name was Dr. Sarah Mitchell. First session I unloaded everything, the marriage, the affair, the pregnancy, the plan. "What you're planning," she said carefully, "it's going to be extremely painful. Not just for them, for you too. I know, and it might not give you the closure you're looking for." "I'm not looking for closure," I said. "I'm looking for justice." She was quiet for a moment. "Okay, but promise me you'll keep seeing me afterward. Because you're going to need help processing the aftermath. I promised. Then I chose the date. Sunday, March the 17th, 2024, St. Patrick's Day. I checked the church calendar. Pastor David was scheduled to preach on family and faith, building a legacy. Emily would be 23 weeks pregnant by then, visibly showing safely into the second trimester, where everyone would be comfortable celebrating. Grace Fellowship had a tradition called testimony time during Sunday morning services, an open mic section right before the sermon where anyone could share a story about God's faithfulness in their life. I'd never done it. In 4 years at that church, I'd never spoken publicly. I emailed the church secretary and requested 5 minutes during testimony time that Sunday. She emailed back within an hour. "Of course, Christopher. We'd love to hear from you. Do you need any tech support?" I told her I'd bring my own laptop and handle the visuals myself. "Great," she wrote. "See you Sunday." The days leading up to March 17th were surreal. Emily had no idea. No one did. I went to work, came home, attended church functions, played the devoted husband preparing for fatherhood. Emily's baby shower was scheduled for early April. Patricia was planning this huge event at the church fellowship hall. Emily kept showing me Pinterest boards and asking what I thought about decorations. "I really want a woodland theme," she said. "Little animals and forest colors. What do you think?" "Sounds perfect," I said. Brandon was around constantly. At church, obviously, but also at random times. He'd stop by the house to drop off worship charts for Emily. He'd text her random jokes that she'd laugh at in front of me. Once, I came home early and they were sitting on our couch together, just talking, and Emily jumped like I'd caught them doing something wrong. "Brandon was just leaving," she said quickly. "Yeah, just wanted to pray over the baby," Brandon said, standing up. He'd always been good at lying. "That's thoughtful," I said. "Thanks, man." He left. Emily went to the bathroom. I stood in my own living room and thought about how many times he'd probably been here when I wasn't. How many lies had been told in this space. I practiced my testimony every night, alone in my car, parked in empty lots. I'd time it. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Factual, calm, devastating. I had backup plans if they tried to cut my microphone. I'd prepared mass emails to the entire church directory with all the evidence attached. But I didn't think they'd cut me off. Not at first, because they'd think I was about to give some sweet testimony about God blessing our marriage with a baby. They were going to learn very quickly that they were wrong. The night before, Emily asked me why I'd seemed distant lately. We were getting ready for bed. She was rubbing lotion on her belly, this nightly ritual she'd started. "Just stressed about work," I said. She came over and kissed my forehead. That patronizing kiss I'd grown to hate. "You're going to be such a good dad," she said. "I can't wait to see you with our baby." Our baby. Like it was ours. Like the lie had become so comfortable, she'd started believing it herself. I wanted to tell her right then, wanted to watch her face crumble. But I'd waited this long. One more night. "Get some sleep," I said. "Big day tomorrow." She smiled. "It's just Sunday service." "Yeah," I said. "Just Sunday." I didn't sleep that night. Lay there next to my pregnant wife, carrying another man's child, watching the ceiling, thinking about the moment I'd been planning for months. At some point, doubt crept in. Was I going too far? Would this make me just as bad as them? Should I handle this privately like everyone would tell me to? But then I remembered Emily's text to Brandon. "He'll never suspect. He trusts me completely." I remembered watching her sing in the choir while her father preached about integrity. I remembered her announcing the pregnancy on Christmas morning, with tears of joy, while I smiled and died inside. No, they'd made their choices. They'd lied to everyone, not just to me. And everyone deserved to know the truth. I'd been playing a part for so long. The quiet husband, the good son-in-law, the man who never made waves. Sunday morning, I was done with the performance. I woke up at 6 a.m. Sunday, March 17th. Showered, dressed in my best suit. Navy blue, the one I'd worn to our wedding. Wanted to look unshakable. The DNA test and all supporting documents were in a leather folder in my car. I'd triple-checked everything the night before. Emily was still asleep. She'd been tired lately, pregnancy fatigue. I made coffee, drank it while looking out the kitchen window at the sunrise, and felt absolutely calm. Emily came downstairs around 7:30 wearing a maternity dress. Floral print, pastel colors. She looked beautiful, which made everything worse. "You look nice," she said, kissing my cheek. "What's the occasion?" "Just wanted to dress up for church," I said. She smiled. "I love that about you. You always make an effort." We drove separately. I'd told her I needed to stop by the hospital first to check on a patient. A lie. But what was one more lie in a marriage built on them? I sat in the church parking lot for 15 minutes, watching families walk in. Smiling faces, kids running around, people greeting each other with hugs. A normal Sunday morning at Grace Fellowship. They had no idea what was about to happen. I walked in at 9:45. Service started at 10. The sanctuary was packed. Usual Sunday crowd, probably 800 people. Families filled the rows. The worship team was warming up on stage. Brandon was at the front with his guitar, running through scales. Emily was in the choir section, talking to another singer. Her hand rested on her belly, that unconscious gesture pregnant women do. 23 weeks along, clearly, visibly pregnant. I took my usual seat, 4th row center. A few people waved. Mike and Karen from our old small group came over. "Hey, Christopher, we missed you guys at small group last week." "Yeah, Emily wasn't feeling well. Pregnancy stuff." Karen smiled. "I remember those days. It gets better in the 3rd trimester. You excited?" "Very," I said. They moved on. I sat there, hands folded, feeling nothing but cold certainty. Pastor David came out at 9:58, reviewed his notes at his chair on stage. He was wearing his typical Sunday outfit. Dress pants, button-up shirt, no tie, approachable shepherd vibes. At 10 a.m. exactly, the lights dimmed. The worship set began. Brandon led 3 songs. "Good, Good Father," "Waymaker," "Build My Life." His voice was perfect as always. People raised their hands, swayed, sang along. Emily sang harmonies from the choir section. Eyes closed, hands raised. The picture of worship. I watched them and felt absolutely nothing. After worship, Pastor David did welcome and announcements. Visitors stood up and were applauded. Upcoming events were promoted. Then he paused, smiled at the congregation. "We have a special testimony this morning from Christopher Hayes. Christopher, come on up." Applause as I stood and walked to the stage. Genuine, warm applause. People assumed I was about to give some sweet testimony about God blessing us with a baby. I saw Emily's face in the choir section. She looked surprised, but pleased, gave me an encouraging smile. Brandon looked mildly curious. Melissa was in the congregation with their 2 kids, ages 6 and 4. She looked tired, like she always did. I took the microphone from Pastor David, connected my laptop to the sanctuary's projection system. The tech team had set it up for me, thinking I was sharing baby photos or something. I looked out at 800 faces, and I began. "Good morning, Grace Fellowship. Many of you have known me for 4 years as Emily's husband, as Pastor David's son-in-law. You've watched me serve, volunteer, try to be the man this family and this church needed me to be. Nods, smiles, they were with me. When Emily announced her pregnancy on Christmas morning, you celebrated with us. You called it a miracle. You prayed for our baby. More nods. Emily's smile was getting uncertain now. Something in my tone wasn't right. But I need to tell you the truth. I paused. Let the moment settle. The baby Emily is carrying is not mine. Silence. Complete, shocked silence. Then audible gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily stood up in the choir section. "Christopher, what are you doing?" Pastor David stood from his chair. "Son, this is not appropriate." I kept talking, voice calm. "I have a DNA test from a prenatal screening conducted in February. The results show a % probability that I am the biological father of Emily's baby." I held up the document, projected the first page on the screens behind me. Official letterhead, medical terminology, the stark numbers. The congregation erupted in whispers. Shock, confusion. "This is insane!" Emily was crying now. "Christopher, please stop!" "The biological father," I continued, "is Brandon Miller, your worship leader." Chaos. Melissa screamed from the congregation. "Why? What?" Brandon dropped his guitar. It hit the stage with a loud, discordant crash. "That's a lie. He's making this up." Pastor David was trying to get to the microphone, but I'd positioned myself carefully. "This is slander. We will handle this privately as a family." "I have photographs," I said. I clicked to the next slide. Images filled the screens. Emily and Brandon entering a hotel room. Different dates, different hotels. The timestamps were clear. Gasps turned to shouts. People were standing up. "I have text messages." Another click. Screenshots. "I miss you. Can't wait for tomorrow. He'll never suspect." "I have video footage." I played a 10-second clip. Brandon and Emily kissing in the church parking lot. The angle showed the church sign clearly in the background. Date stamp, Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. Emily collapsed onto a chair in the choir section, sobbing. Someone rushed to her side. Melissa was pushing through the crowd toward Brandon, screaming at him. "You bastard! You said you were working late! You said—" She reached him and slapped him, hard. The sound echoed through the sanctuary. Brandon stammered. "Melissa, I can explain." "How long?" she screamed. "How long were you screwing her?" Pastor David finally got close enough to try to grab the microphone. "This is not how we handle things in the church." I pulled the mic away and kept talking. "For those wondering about timing, Emily and Brandon's affair began in summer of 2022. It's been ongoing for over a year and a half. They used Tuesday night Bible study as their cover. They had sex in the church office." I pointed to the office wing, visible through the sanctuary windows. The same office where Pastor David counsels couples struggling in their marriages. Complete pandemonium now. People shouting, crying, standing up, trying to leave but too shocked to move. "For 6 months, I've watched you all celebrate a miracle baby that was conceived in betrayal. I've listened to Brandon lead worship while he destroyed his own family and mine. I've heard Pastor David preach about family values while protecting his daughter's lies. Pastor David was red-faced, furious. "You have destroyed this church. You—" "No," I said, and my voice cut through the chaos. "They destroyed it. I'm just showing everyone what it really is." I looked directly at Emily. She was hunched over, hands on her belly, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. Then I looked at Brandon. He was standing frozen, Melissa screaming at him while several people tried to pull her back. Finally, I looked at Pastor David. "I'm done performing for you," I said. "I'm done pretending. This marriage is over. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." I dropped the microphone, literally let it fall to the stage, and I walked out. The sanctuary erupted behind me, shouting, crying, chaos. Someone was calling 911. I heard it as I pushed through the doors into the lobby. People tried to stop me, grab my arm, ask questions. "Christopher, wait! What's going on? Is this real?" My brother Michael was waiting by the exit, exactly where I'd told him to be. "You okay?" "Let's go." We walked to my car. I could hear the commotion from the sanctuary. More people were flooding out of the building. As we pulled out of the parking lot, an ambulance turned in. Someone must have called because of Emily. Michael looked at me. Feel better? I thought about it. Did I? Ask me later, I said. We drove to a diner 40 minutes away, far from anyone who'd recognize us. Sat in a booth and ordered coffee. My hands were shaking. That was the most insane thing I've ever seen, Michael said. And I once watched a guy propose at a funeral. I laughed. It came out kind of broken. Yeah. So what now? Now I file for divorce, move out, start over. You gonna be okay? I looked out the diner window at the highway traffic. Normal people doing normal things on a normal Sunday. I don't know, I said, but at least I'm done lying. The fallout started immediately. Emily was taken to the hospital that afternoon. Severe panic attack, possible preeclampsia. The baby was fine, but they kept her overnight for observation. Pastor David and Patricia released a statement through the church website by Sunday evening. Today our family experienced a painful public accusation. We are seeking truth through prayer and counseling and ask for privacy during this difficult time. Privacy, after I'd exposed everything in front of 800 people. By Monday morning, the story had spread through the entire evangelical community in Georgia. Someone had recorded part of my testimony on their phone, and it was circulating on Christian Twitter. Grace Fellowship's Facebook group became a war zone. Half the congregation defending Emily and Brandon, saying I should have handled it privately. The other half calling for accountability. Brandon posted a statement on Instagram Monday afternoon. I have made terrible mistakes that have hurt people I love. I am stepping down from all ministry positions and seeking counseling. I ask for grace and privacy for my family during this time. He turned off comments within an hour because people were destroying him. Melissa filed for divorce that same day. I know because her attorney reached out to mine to coordinate. They wanted my evidence for her case. Tuesday morning, I met with Rebecca Chen and officially filed for divorce. Irreconcilable differences, citing adultery. In Georgia, that meant Emily couldn't claim alimony. I waived any rights to the baby since I wasn't the biological father. Emily tried calling me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. Changed my number that afternoon. Wednesday, I moved out of our house. Took only what was mine, clothes, books, a few pieces of furniture I'd brought into the marriage. Left everything else. Michael helped me load a U-Haul while Emily was at her parents' house. The church elder board held an emergency meeting Wednesday night. By Thursday, they'd asked for Brandon's resignation. He gave it immediately. They asked Pastor David to resign too. He refused at first, but when 3 of the largest donor families threatened to pull funding, he agreed to step down temporarily to focus on family healing. By the end of that first week, Grace Fellowship's Sunday attendance had dropped by 40%. Multiple families announced they were leaving. The worship team dissolved. Small groups were canceled. I watched it all from a distance, moved into a 1-bedroom apartment across town, blocked everyone from church on social media, except for a few people I trusted to keep me updated. The hardest part wasn't the revenge. The hardest part was after. Emily's sister Angela called me in week 2. I know what she did was unforgivable, but she's in bad shape, Christopher. The stress is affecting the baby. Is this what you wanted? I wanted the truth, I said. What happens after that is on them, not me. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel guilty. Emily was hospitalized again at 27 weeks with preeclampsia. High blood pressure, protein in her urine, risk of premature labor. Angela called and told me, said Emily was asking for me. I drove to the hospital, stood in the hallway outside her room for 20 minutes, trying to decide if I should go in. Through the door, I could hear Patricia's voice. This stress is killing her. That man destroyed our family over a mistake. A mistake. That's what they were calling a 1.5 years of calculated deception. I turned around and left. The following Sunday, Grace Fellowship had interim leadership, a guest pastor from another church. I heard attendance was under 600. People I'd known for years were starting church plants across town, looking for untainted leadership. By week 4, Pastor David officially resigned. They gave him 3-month severance and required him to vacate the church-owned house where they'd lived for 20 years. Brandon moved back to Kentucky to live with his parents. Lost his worship leader salary, lost all his side income from conferences and recording. His Christian music career was over. Emily had to move back in with her parents when I moved out. Lost her job at the church bookstore, had no income, no insurance, except through her dad's severance package. Melissa got primary custody of the kids with strict visitation limits for Brandon. The church community rallied around her, started a GoFundMe for her legal fees that raised over $15,000 in a week. I watched all of this happen and felt complicated. My therapist, Dr. Mitchell, asked me in session 5 weeks after the exposure, "Do you regret it?" The revenge? No. They needed to face consequences. But, I didn't think about all the other people. Melissa's kids, the church families who lost their community, people who weren't part of the lie but got hurt anyway. "You revealed truth," she said. "You're not responsible for what they did with that information." "Doesn't feel that way." She leaned forward. "Christopher, you spent 4 years being what everyone else needed you to be. When you finally stood up for yourself, you felt guilty. Do you see the pattern?" I did. It's just that knowing something intellectually and feeling it are different things. The divorce was finalized in mid-June, uncontested. Emily didn't fight anything. We split assets 50-50, even though I could have gotten more. I signed away all parental rights to the baby since I wasn't the biological father. I didn't attend the final hearing. My attorney handled it. I never saw Emily in person again. She gave birth to a boy in July. Named him Jacob. I know because Angela sent me a text with a photo. I looked at it once, then deleted it. Brandon is listed on the birth certificate. He drives 4 hours every other weekend from Kentucky to see his son. Co-parenting with Emily while barely speaking to each other. Grace Fellowship, never recovered. Within 6 months, membership had dropped to under 800. They eventually sold the building and merged with a smaller church across town. The megachurch that Pastor David had built over 20 years just dissolved. I stopped going to church entirely. At first it felt wrong, like I was losing my faith along with everything else. But the more time passed, the more I realized I'd never really had faith in God. I'd had faith in the performance, in the appearance of holiness, in being accepted by the right people. I started exploring what faith meant outside of that system, hiking on Sunday mornings instead of sitting in a sanctuary, reading theology that didn't come from evangelical bestseller lists, praying sometimes when it felt real, not when I was supposed to. I threw myself into work, took on extra shifts, became charge nurse in the pediatric ICU. The hospital became my community. My colleagues respected me for my skills, not because I was married to the right person or knew the right people. I made new friends, joined a hiking group full of people who'd never heard of Grace Fellowship and didn't care about my church drama. Met a guy named James at work. Atheist, kind, no judgment. We started getting beers after shifts. I attended an ex-evangelical support group and realized I wasn't alone. Other people had similar stories. Different details, same themes. Control, performance, the crushing weight of pretending to be who you're not. I started therapy twice a week instead of once. Worked through the betrayal, the religious trauma, the people-pleasing patterns I'd learned growing up. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again, whoever that was. I grew a beard, got a small tattoo on my forearm, a compass, reminder to trust my own direction. Started cooking again, something I'd loved before marriage, but Emily always complained about the mess. Took a solo weekend trip to Asheville in August. First time I'd done something just because I wanted to in years. My mom barely recognized me when I visited her in September. "You look different," she said. "Good different. Real different." That felt about right. By fall, I was in a better place. Not healed. Healing isn't linear. my therapist kept reminding me. But better. I heard updates occasionally. Emily was living with her sister Angela now, 2 hours away, working as a receptionist at a dental office, raising Jacob, trying to co-parent with Brandon from a distance. Brandon was working construction in Kentucky, seeing his kids every other weekend, plus Jacob when he could make the drive. No longer involved in any church, reportedly struggling with depression. Pastor David and Patricia moved to Florida, retirement community. He occasionally guest spoke at small churches, but his days of leading a megachurch were over. Melissa remarried in October, met someone in her divorce support group, a good guy who'd also been betrayed. Her kids were thriving. She started a blog about healing from infidelity that gained a following. She sent me a card. "Your courage helped me find mine. Thank you." That card meant more than she probably knew. And me. I was building a life that felt like mine. Started dating in the fall. Nothing serious at first, just learning how to trust again. Met a woman named Rachel in November, 3rd grade teacher, kind, no church baggage. We went on a few dates. I told her the whole story on date 3, expecting her to run. "Sounds like you did what you had to do," she said, "and you're being honest about it. That's more than most people." We kept seeing each other, slowly. I wasn't ready to rush into anything. By November, 8 months after that Sunday morning at Grace Fellowship, I was in a 1-bedroom apartment I'd decorated myself, with a job I was good at, friends who knew the real me, and the beginning of something that might eventually be called peace. I still thought about it sometimes. The revenge, the fallout, whether I'd do it differently if I could. Honestly, maybe. Maybe I would have tried private confrontation first, given them a chance to come clean before burning everything down publicly. But then I'd remember Emily's text. "He'll never suspect, he trusts me completely." I'd remember watching her perform holiness every Sunday while carrying another man's child. I'd remember the 4 years I spent trying to be enough for people who would never value the real me. And I'd think, no, they made their choices. They lied to everyone, not just to me. The truth needed to come out. Was the method perfect? No. Did it hurt people who didn't deserve it? Yes. Would I carry some guilt about that forever? Probably. But I also knew this. I'd spent 4 years playing a part. The devoted husband, the quiet son-in-law, the man who never made waves. I'd nearly lost myself in that performance. That Sunday in March, I walked off their stage for good. And you know what? I'm finally okay with the silence. I was sitting on my apartment balcony one Sunday morning in late November, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. Rachel was asleep in my bed. She'd stayed over the night before. My phone was off. No church service to get ready for, no performance to put on. Just me, the morning sun, and the quiet knowledge that I didn't owe anyone a version of myself that wasn't true. Somewhere, Emily was probably getting Jacob ready for the day. Brandon was probably driving back from another weekend visit with his kids. Pastor David was probably preparing a guest sermon for some small church in Florida. And I was here, free, not untouched by what happened, not unmarked, but free. I thought about something Dr. Mitchell had said in our last session. The opposite of performing isn't doing nothing, it's being genuine, and being genuine sometimes means things get messy. Things had definitely gotten messy, but I'd take genuine mess over polished lies any day. I finished my coffee, watched the sun climb higher, thought about making breakfast for Rachel when she woke up. Maybe we'd go hiking later, maybe we'd just stay in and watch movies. Whatever we did, it would be because we wanted to, not because we were supposed to. For 4 years, I'd been playing a part so convincing. I almost forgot it was a performance. I'd been the husband Emily needed, the son-in-law her family required, the church member everyone expected. I'd been so busy being what they needed that I'd lost track of who I was. That Sunday morning, March 17th, 2024, I'd walked onto that stage, knowing there was no going back. That, in 4.5 minutes, I'd destroy the life I'd carefully built with people who never really valued me. And I'd do it all over again. Not because I enjoyed the pain it caused, not because I got some sick satisfaction from revenge, but because I'd been playing a part for so long, I forgot I could just walk off the stage. Turns out the best part of the show is what happens after the curtain falls, when you finally get to be yourself again.